Hi everybody, so good to be with you here on the new platform with the A and F podcast. My name's Hayley Muir and I'm joined by my lovely colleague Vicki McEwen, and together we form an organisation called Better Me, Better Us. So Vicki, would you like to introduce yourselves? I think some of this audience may have heard from you before.
Yep, so my name is Vicki McEwen and I have been on the podcast with Alan Scott twice, once at a conference and once for a podcast.
Nice.
And I've stayed in contact with them both, and we were thrilled to be asked to come in and regularly start having some of these conversations. We absolutely love to talk, and it was just about making that conversation bigger. And I guess to give a bit of background, qualified social worker and now a therapist working with young people, children and adults and families, so very much work with everybody, do quite a lot of adoption work. I don't know if you want to introduce your background, Hayley.
Yeah, also, so originally a social worker, and that's how Vicki and I both met many moons ago, too many moons ago that I actually like to not count them. So social work is my background, and I've worked in lots of different guises as a social worker. So whether that be child protection, working in what's classed as early help, as a practitioner, and also offering some supervision to other colleagues. Since then, I've sort of branched out into training and consultancy, and I've worked a lot with social work organisations and charitable organisations, both in UK and abroad. And really, our whole spec is about relationships, because we believe that relationships make the world go round. And that's whether you are a social worker, you're a friend to somebody, or you're a member of a family. Relationships are so pivotal to everything that we do. And we're so pleased to be included in the A&F podcast, because adoption and social work are often seen as such separate entities, I think would be fair to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And yet what we would suggest is they're inextricably linked. Everybody that goes through the adoption process, whether that's the children, the birth parents, the adoptive parents, or their wider network, all have contact with social work in one of its many guises.
Yeah. And I think that's why, isn't it? Because in order to do the jobs that we do, we've had to go to university and get different qualifications. And so we know the theory and the legislation and the processes behind things, but it's bringing it to life, applying it to practice. And what does that look like in people's homes on a day-to-day level? What does that look like? And that's why we want to have these conversations, because it is all about the relationship and how that looks. Following on from what you've just said there, Hayley, I think absolutely social work and adoption are seen as two very different things. And actually thinking about our conversation today in relationships, it is all about working with people, isn't it? In whatever role you are in, you are working with a person, but how that person receives the support massively is impacted by the role that person is in. A child protection social worker is often not very welcomed into a family home, understandably, because...
What are you trying to say, Vicki?
Understandably, because we're coming in because there's a level of risk and something needs to change. And that actually, for want of a better word, I was going to say forced, and force is absolutely the wrong word. It's not a forced change, but it's very much things need to be done differently to maintain the safety of everybody in this family home.
Yeah.
I suppose from an adoption side, social workers or professionals, I know when I become involved, the family has wanted that support. They've wanted to engage with that system and those professionals. So it's a very different power imbalance, isn't it, for want of a better word?
100%. So I remember as a social work student, actually, one of my roles was doing a report for a step parent adoption. And there was a lot, a sort of understanding within the social work world that, oh, lucky Hayley, the student, she's going to do a step parent adoption, so she'll get some foil wrapped biscuits and a nice cup of tea when she arrives. However, as a child protection worker, that's not often what I got when I arrived. And that power imbalance is still there, isn't it? So we like to think that perhaps it's different with the adoptive parents, but I'm going to guess if you're going through that adoptive process, and I do have some friends that have been through that, you're still very conscious of the decision-making power of that social worker that's coming out to do that work with you, eh?
Absolutely.
So yeah, those relationships.
Yeah, and you just saying there about going to families' home and having like tea and biscuits. Absolutely. There are some families that wouldn't happen, but it comes to the relationship, doesn't it? I know, and you definitely, I've seen your practice, Hayley, building that relationship with families. Yes, you might not be going out and you might be having really difficult conversations about risk and about safety and the future of that family and what that will look like. But if you have the relationship, you can have some really, really difficult conversations about that relationship and bringing the human and using the right language. Because it's no good coming in and trying to connect with people using all of this jargon. I know now when I read back through children's child permanence reports, and I don't know what they're on about. Yeah. And having got that knowledge myself, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And especially when we're using acronyms, and it's not relatable, isn't it? Is it? It's not bringing it to life.
And it pushes that power imbalance further down your throat, doesn't it? So I'm going to write a very wordy and powerful report about you and yours, which you can't fully understand. So again, I've just disconnected from you. And you're so right, because we are very heavily influenced by theory, because we have to know the theory in order to get the positions and the roles that you and I have both had. But hopefully we are striving to constantly link that theory to practice. But again, lots of people say they're doing that. I think it's linking it to real life, isn't it? It's linking it to a person, a family, a context, a situation. And one of the things that Vicki and I are always saying, and I know anybody that's listening to this that's ever been on one of my training courses, you would have definitely heard it. Say what you see. I stole it from Catchphrase and Stephen Mulhern on a Saturday night. If anybody likes that, hashtag Stephen Mulhern. If you'd like to hit us up, please do. But say what you see. Like you just said, well, they've got challenging behavior. Lovely. So is that child in that family, but they probably look very different. So what does it, if I walked into that family and said, there's some challenging behavior, what would it look like?
And even you just saying that, and I suppose some of the conversations over the years that I've had with Alan Scott is that some of these difficulties and situations that families find themselves in are not specific to adoption and fostering. No. So birth families, in terms of the difficult teenage years or risky behavior or what's the word?
Experimenting.
Yes, that's the word. And again, it's that, isn't it? Bringing the human. I'm not going to. No, I know that wasn't a big word, but use big words.
It's early though, Vicki. We'll let you off.
It is early, but it's that, isn't it? That some of these things happen across society, and yet we very much put them on certain groups of people, and we absolutely shouldn't do that. And again, it's about having that conversation on a bigger scale, which is what we're about. We want to have these conversations on a bigger scale, talking about the power of relationships.
Absolutely. Right.
Shall we leave it there in terms of our first introduction? Let's not waffle too much and put people off.
I think so, yeah. Look, let's stop. And our details are included on the A&F podcast and their information. So if we'd be we're always really interested, like Vicki said, to have wider conversations. So if there is a certain topic or something you would like to hear us talk about, you're curious to have an input into, please let us know, either via our own social media or website for Better Me, Better Us, or through Alan Scott on the A&F podcast. And look forward to being with you all soon.
Yes, regularly, hopefully.
Yeah.
Bye.